Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conversations with the Coaches podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, and I have the immense pleasure of having one of my favorite guests back on for a second conversation. This is Andrea Sigetich. Did I remember the pronunciation right? That's Sigetich?
You did it beautifully.
Yes, thank you. I was practicing a little bit beforehand. But the first time we talked, Andrea is one of the few coaches I've spoken to who has essentially gone through it all, more or less. She is a retired coach. Let me refresh your memory as to who Andrea is before we get back into the conversation. Andrea opened her coaching business, Sigetich, back in 1997. She's logged over 10,000 coaching hours working with executives, leaders, and entrepreneurs. She also teaches for CTI. More importantly, and we talked about this before I hit record, she lives a well-balanced life up in the high desert, loves to hike, and apparently soon renew her passion for backpacking. She's visited all 63 United States national parks and remains, first and foremost, an adventurer, which is just, I love that so much. I remain an adventurer. I just wanted to say it again. So, Andrea, thanks for coming back on and chatting with me again. It's really good to see you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Kevin.
So I mean, maybe blowing smoke a little bit up your butt, but I was speaking admiringly about your coaching journey and how you have, at least in my experience so far, having talked with, at this point, almost a couple hundred coaches, particularly for the podcast. You have a very unique perspective, having really been through the entire coaching journey professionally, having your own business, coaching for so long, coaching so many different types of people across an area of time. I mean, I'm thinking about 1997 and how differently the world feels when I kind of summon up my memory of 1997 in my head across the board. But I think especially the coaching business has evolved so much in the last, I mean, it's evolved so much in the last 5 years, let alone the last 25 or 30. So you had a lot to say that I hadn't really heard before, or not a perspective that I hadn't quite gotten before on how the coaching business has evolved. So I think I want to start you out by just teeing you up and seeing what you have to say about what's maybe the most significant evolution you've seen in the coaching business over your time in the business, in the trenches.
Well, it's really interesting because I'm still teaching for CTI. I get to interact with brand new coaches all the time too, and I'm learning a lot from them. So my answers are twofold. One is that I mentioned it last time. The word coaching is like people know what you're talking about, and so the old coach jokes that were around are not quite so funny anymore. I mean, people generally know what it is. Certainly in business, they know what it is. But the second big change is the technology. I mean, absolutely. When I learned to coach, we always coached by the phone, by phone. Maybe once in a while under certain circumstances in person. But now coaches are seeing their clients, on the screen, and I think that's a big difference, I think.
That's a really good point too. I mean, especially the ability to have everyone's got a camera, access to a camera. I mean, it's kind of weird to think about it that way, but everybody's basically got a camera on them or very nearby at all times. Yeah. I'm still getting used to it, and it's been around for quite a while, but that ability to, and this is one of the reasons too, like this podcast is an audio only podcast. Obviously, when people are listening to it, they won't be seeing us, but we get to see each other. And that's something I always like to mention when I'm interviewing people or when I'm talking to anybody, is even if this isn't going to be going anywhere that people are going to see, I like to be able to change my facial expression and raise my eyebrows. And like, I'm typically like a very physical talker anyway. You can kind of see my hands bubbling around the bottom of my Zoom screen. And I like to be able to demonstrate that. I like to be available physically in a way that's actually perceivable by the people I'm talking to, because I want them to be able to understand me, and also to allow me to communicate to them that I'm listening, that I'm following what they're saying, or that maybe like if I make a quizzical expression, maybe like I didn't hear something. Like there's all sorts of different levels of communication now that have become accessible to us via this digital realm, as opposed to just the voice. And I mean, it doesn't, you say it like, oh, we have cameras now. It's like, it sounds pretty simple, but the change and the effectiveness of coaching in this format, I think, has been a profound evolution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. It took me a while to get through the change because I learned to hear and to recognize changes in tone, and changes in expression, and whether or not people were moving their hands, and if they had a smile or a frown. I mean, I learned to hear that over the phone. That's the way we were taught, and that's the way I coached for years and years and years. And so when first of all people started coaching, so where they could see so much, I at first I was a little bit resistant to it, as I said, well, okay, but don't over rely on what you're seeing. I mean, don't make assumptions from what you're seeing. And now, as I've been able to watch many more coaches coach on Zoom, mostly, where they see, I can see how they're using it and integrating it. I think I remain with the caution of don't rescue your clients. So it's because you see a frown, you may that may change how you're coaching, or you may calm it down, or you may not confront them as much or something. And I want it to be additional information, but not information that causes you to be less of a coach, or less challenging, or less listening at that deep level, just because you can see their face. When I teach now, I'll do we do some coaching demos, and I'll do some with the cameras on and some with the cameras off. And then I challenge all of my students to try coaching with the camera off, and just see what happens and get a feel for that. So
that's again, see, I don't hear that really from anybody else. That sort of make sure that you don't come to over rely on a particular tool or a particular avenue, because it can obscure what you're trying to perceive. I was going to say see. You have to watch my terminology here, because it's really about perception and what you're interpreting and picking up from someone. And yeah, it is especially tricky because of how visually dominant human beings are, just from a biological perspective. It's very easy to over rely on that sense anyway. And now that we have access to it, and you have this tool, and you think that you're seeing more, and you're seeing, and that it means you're seeing better. You might be perceiving more, you're getting more information, but it doesn't necessarily follow that you're seeing more clearly or perceiving more clearly. And that depends. It's a matter of getting used to using the tool. And I love that in your teaching, you focus on camera on, camera off, because it really does, anybody who's just been out for a walk and closed their eyes for a minute, and the sounds of nature or wherever your environment happens to be, the way things start to come to you, it doesn't take very long, but you do have to give it just a beat. And then you start to pick up on things that you didn't really know were there. You hear a couple squirrels chirping on the other side of a tree. You hear a bird flying over. You hear a plane in the distance. Maybe you hear traffic that you didn't realize the road was that close. All sorts of stuff like that can emerge when you close off a sense. And so I think that's such a key exercise for coaches in particular, who are required to be very intuitive and interpretive when they're engaging with their clients. A mistake here or a mistake there could lead you down a false path that could take, a long time to get back from.
Yes. So when you see, you add that sense in, turning it off does, I believe, raise the intensity of your hearing, as you just described. But I also want to talk about from the client perspective. The first time I faced this was a long time ago. I was coaching a CEO, and I was coaching him in person. He lived by where I live, so I'd be in his office every week, and we'd coach. And then I moved, and he said, well, does that end our coaching relationship? And I said, no, we're going to do it over the phone now, which is the way I coached most of my clients. And what changed in him was remarkable, because I no longer read his nonverbals. He had to articulate what he was feeling, what he was thinking, where he wanted to go, and the coaching. And he said, "This is better," and I happen to think it is. But he got better, and he became better able to notice what he was feeling, thinking, doing, and communicate that.
And I feel like that touches on a concept that's very near and dear to my heart, and any of my creative or communication pursuits as I've moved through life, is that limitations aren't necessarily limiting. Sometimes limitations of form or format can actually be uplifting or focusing. And I think about times I've tried to write, a novella, whereas I could really excel in the short story format or something like that, where it's the limitations of word count, and you have to just the way in which the format changed my approach allowed me to pour myself into whatever the thing I was trying to create was in a different way that accentuated different aspects of who I was and what I was trying to express. And some things worked better than others based on subject matter as well as format. Sometimes my mood would be such that it wasn't really the right, like the format I was trying to communicate in wasn't quite right. Sometimes what I could say in 15 seconds on a phone call will take me 30 minutes to type out in a short email, and it's like, which one might be better? Is it like, and how will the person receive this? Like, would it be better for them to be able to read this and have the time to consume it? Or is it going to hit them better if I say it to them in real time and I'm there to respond to any questions they might have? All these considerations, my mind starts to go all these different places, that these things that we think of as limitations can actually be amplifiers or guides or focusers. And there's really, again, case by case basis. Some people, it's going to be better to be communicating with them in a certain way. And for them to communicate with you in a certain way, it's going to bring out the best in them, which again, is sort of, I mean, if you could summarize what a coach is trying to do, bringing out the best, whatever that means for a person, is something that a coach is passionate about.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
It's very fascinating. I love considering tools, both from a classic perspective, like the tools that are tried and trusted, they've been put through the ringer and they work. And then some of the things that are new that people just kind of adopt and maybe haven't properly considered how to use. Like we have a very two-dimensional understanding of how to deploy them. And when sometimes it might be good to pull away from some of those tools, like a Zoom, and maybe just here, you could see, Andrea, if I can move my little lid right there. I have a physical cover for my camera lens, because sometimes, it's just want to close that down, but just making sure that I have an awareness of the usage of the tools I have at my disposal and using the right tools for the right job, so to speak. I feel like I keep just conversing with you, and I was like, I got to come up with questions. This is really great stuff. But now I'm like, my mind, I'm dizzying with the potential of where this conversation could go. I think, another thing too, this is something that came to my mind earlier in the conversation when you were talking in particular about Zoom. But even before that, how we were just talking about the way the technology has changed and evolved coaching in a way that I feel like we're still just really grasping. And Zoom is obviously one of them. And kind of related to that is the ability to reach people at different places and different times, like to record a course that could then be like available online, or to like put together something that someone can, rather than have to attend in person or attend at a particular time from a particular time zone, someone in India or Japan or somewhere in Europe or in Africa can watch something that was recorded 5 days ago in California and be able to access a level of whatever it is being taught or trained. And I feel like that has really, it's another tool for the amplification of what a coach can do, that ability to reach people in a, it's different, obviously, from the one-to-one coaching that a lot of people get their start at. It's different from the other formats, but it has that ability to reach more people in a way that's still impactful.
Right. Yeah, I think that's true. And again, there's an age and experience difference here. A lot of coaches are a lot younger than I am, and are making just great use of the technology that way. And that also makes me think about that while those, while having your blog post or having a video of you can certainly engage people, maybe invite people in, maybe new clients, I don't want to lose sight of the referral process. And so I want to talk just a little bit about the referral process, because coaching is so unique. It's so individually focused. You will build your business through referrals. I mean that's going to end up being your primary source. So one thing I did, I don't know, about 10 years into my business, is I went and looked at my client list, and I looked at who referred them, and then I looked, okay, well, but so who referred Kevin? All right, well, Kevin was referred by Sam, but who referred Sam? Sam was referred by Carla, and I found out that 5 people had built my whole business. And that just kept going upwards. Now, again, I had the advantage of working in organizations, but those 5 people all held the job title Vice President of Organization Development or Vice President of Leadership Development. And so I said, oh, I guess I know who my people are. And I began to just completely target my marketing to those people.
That
So when you have enough experience that you've had a few referrals, look at the commonality. Who are you really resonating with? And those people are the beginning of your referral network.
That's in my head, the words success detective just went across the back of my eyes. I was like, you were like a success detective. It's like, so I've gotten to this point, like, I wonder why. And you start like running your fingers back along the timeline, along the genealogy of your coaching clients.
Right.
And yeah, I feel like if anybody who engages in that, who's been in the business for long enough and engages in that like detective work, is going to find probably something fairly similar, that there's a certain small subset of clients that are at the heart of their entire business network, their client network, and that they probably have one or two things very much in common.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And you might go back and discover that it's salespeople, or it's engineers, or whatever it is. That doesn't matter, except it helps you to see, okay, so what's the language of those people, which I obviously talk well already. And and why don't I just interact there, to look for more clients? So
that is, I mean, I almost said this out loud, not intending the pun at all. I almost said that's very sage advice. I didn't mean to make the pun, but it came into my head, and so I'm just gonna own it. I'm gonna own up to the fact that was a very corny pun, but nonetheless, very true. It's extremely sage advice for people, because a lot of people they feel like, at least, or at least they'll express to me, that they're kind of feeling around in the dark for understanding the why of what they're doing, like why things are working and why they're not. They kind of understand that certain things work, and they kind of have at the very least, an intuitive understanding of how they connect with people very well, and they have systems and processes. But there's this like core, not disconnect, but there's this core mystery of like, why exactly am I connecting with the people I connect with? And it's one of those things where I feel like the information is there once you've been in the business for long enough. There's just enough that you can just look at, and I really feel like it's such a good exercise for an experience, actually a coach, really at almost any level. Obviously, you have to have some information to work off of at first, but I feel like it's just such a good, like, it should almost be a part of like a yearly practice. In my head, I'm still having January thoughts, which are very like end of the last year, beginning of the new year. So I'm still thinking about like, should do this all the time, thinking about forming better habits. And this feels like a good exercise for just making sure that you're staying in touch with who you're serving well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And there's something that I believe you don't have to have experience in a particular profession to coach someone in that profession. I mean, I absolutely believe that. But your experience does help you get in the door, and knowing the language. Like, so I had done all this corporate work, I'd done all this human resources work, and I knew the language really well. And then my husband trained and certified as a coach, and he was a 40-year nonprofit executive when he started. And so he would speak to potential clients using words I didn't even know what he was talking about, So I had to get a little bit educated just on like what their language was before I could work with a nonprofit exec, because just the languaging was so different.
Yeah, and that moment of when someone speaks your language, whether that happens to be industry terminology, or if someone makes a reference to like a book or a movie that you like very much, or like you make that reference and somebody gets it, it's amazing the leap that your relationship takes. If that happens just once or twice, it's just because you begin to feel like that person gets me, that person understands me, even if that journey still has a long way to go before that's actually true. Just that moment of just demonstrating to someone that you do a little bit speak their language. I mean, even if all you could do is ask for directions to the bathroom or the library in their language, extending the analogy, that goes such a long way towards building the kind of trust that's going to be at the foundation of the coaching relationship.
Right.
Man, I know I said this earlier on. I really love talking with you. Even like especially love talking with you. I mean, the obvious reasons: your experience, the way you're able to communicate it. You clearly are a teacher, and you have a teacher's approach. I love the way your mind works. I just feel I can't put my finger on it exactly, but I really, especially even amongst all the other coaches I get to talk to, I've really enjoyed talking to you again. This has been, I don't know, I feel like I have a lot to think about, and also have a lot of my suspicions confirmed. Is that all this makes so much sense.
Can I put one more thing into the air here, because it keeps popping into my brain? There is this woman on a Facebook group I'm on of coaches who's asking about significant relationships in your life and whether or not you're spouse, partner, kids, whatever it is, support you in being a coach. And the responses to her question, I just keep thinking about them. And where it has taken me is, you mentioned this, I think it was before you turned on the recording, that, once you're a coach, you don't like shut it off to talk to your spouse or your kids, or even though sometimes they want you to put the lid on it, there's still sort of a way that you be in the world that doesn't go away. And I just keep thinking about how important that is for relationships. And I don't have any bottom line, but you may find yourself, I know I certainly find myself gravitating towards people who are coach-like, who can still listen well and who can ask powerful questions. And the other people in my life sort of drift away because it's not enough. It's just not enough to share a movie if you can't have a beer afterwards together and talk about it,
Exactly. I find that my exposure to coaches and coaching it just makes me a better human being in general because of the way my values shift in that direction. And I mean, you lay it out and it makes perfect sense. It's a good listener, is very empathetic, able to invest in your well-being without having any sort of personal stake in it.
Yes.
There are certain like just human interaction tools that have just like muscles that have been developed that are strong in a coach. That it pays such dividends in all of my relationships, all across the board.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
it does do that. And sometimes people lose relationships. I lost a couple. Sometimes people lose relationships as a result of that focus on, I really do care about your growth and development and you having a happy and fulfilled life. I really do care about that,
Yeah, we talked about it earlier in the conversation, how important fit is when it comes to coaching. It's like not every coach is for every person, and not every person is for every person. Sometimes people come into your life, sometimes they fall away. It's natural. That doesn't mean it's not difficult sometimes, and sometimes not painful, but it is natural. It's just a part of the process. And so I like our process.
Yeah, that's great. One of my clients, Paula was her first name, taught me a reason, a season, a lifetime, and that never goes away. It's a good thing to remember.
It is. Well, as I suspected, time has flown. I've already had you for 25 plus minutes chatting, so I should let you go. But again, thank you for talking with me again. Thank you for who you are. Not just what you've done and what you do. Thank you for who you are. I just appreciate that you exist in the world and that I've gotten to talk to you a couple times. And if you don't mind, I could see myself reaching back out to you in like May or June and just having like a little summer check-in and just, have some new questions. I have some new things that have occurred to me and chat again. I don't know. I'll let you know if I probably will want to, and I'll probably reach out, but I've so enjoyed this conversation. I've so enjoyed the last one. Thank you. I think I'm just a long way around just saying thank you again. I just really appreciate that we got a chance to talk again today.
Great. Thanks.
And to the audience, you know Andrea, you've heard her before. She's fantastic. Great person to know. If you get a chance to talk to her, take advantage of it. It's delightful. She's happily retired. She's backpacking, somewhere in America in the next couple of months. I'm really excited about that for her and a little bit jealous myself. But we'll talk about that offline, and we'll talk to you again here very soon.